Hello everyone, welcome back to Earp Sister Feels. This is my video number 5. My name is Kevin Batchelder, and on this video I'm going to be discussing 3 episodes from season 1 of Wynonna Earp. Two-Faced Jack, number 108, Bury Me With My Guns On, 109, and She Won't Be Gone, episode 110. Again, big thank you to all of you who've been leaving comments, be they here on Twitter or Facebook, about these episodes. And also a big thank you to the folks who've been leaving video comments that I include when I release the final version of these videos. It's a lot of fun to get those and to hear some thoughts. You folks seeing things I don't, or adding some opinions and perspectives. This is what makes this so much fun, getting the Earpers involved and having a nice community feel for these. So can't tell you how much it means to me. So thank you very much. Those of you, some of you are doing it regularly, some do it every now and then. All of it is great to see. And we're just building up as we get near the end of season 1 for even more Earp Sister goodness, especially as we get near the end of the season. Now, for those of you who might be new to these, a reminder that, as I mentioned, when I do release these on social media, Facebook and Twitter specifically is where I put the links, you have a couple of days to be able to reply via video if you like. You don't need a special app. You do want to share some thoughts on these specific episodes or the Earp Sisters in general. You can just tap the record a reply button on your smartphone right below this video, and you can record one yourself, review it, make sure it's okay, and then send it off to me, and then I can include it in the final video. So it's a lot of fun. Feel free to do that. And, we're just going to keep cranking throughout all 3 seasons of Wynonna Earp between now and the probably late spring as we get ready for the next season. So love it if you get involved. I just love it if you comment and watch. All of you Earpers, you guys inspire me. You have so much great stuff to share, and I really appreciate it. So we're having fun. All right, let's talk about some episode specifics here. Starting off with Two-Faced Jack. Very big, important episode in the series, but very little Earp Sister stuff here in this one. All we really get is, by the time Wynonna has dispatched Jack, at the very end when the 2 of them are at the homestead, and she's been taking out members of the 7, we finally see her, lighting that photo of them on fire and just kind of dropping it in the bucket with Waverly right there with her. And again, we're starting to see even more of the amazing job that Mel does with the faces and the emotion that comes across in the 2 of them together. So really good scene, but not much there for the 2 of them. Much the same way in 109, Bury Me With My Guns On. Really, all we really have is a scene there at Shorty's after... Dolls didn't really back up Wynonna very much when she had her psych eval thing. So, and she had, he'd asked her for a badge and all that. Not a lot of fun there. So the 2 of them, as well as finding out that Gus was in talks to sell the bar. Wynonna says, a very important statement to Waverly here when she says, no one is ever taking anything from us again. Again, we love that. The way the 2 of them are sticking together and so forth. So it's some interesting stuff leading up to what's going on here towards the end of season 1. Now in 110, She Won't Be Gone, we got, again, big stuff for the show, and also a lot more of the Earp Sisters together. The 2 of them storming into Shorty's, now that Bobo owns it, with their little ruse to get the, to plant the listening device, is some good stuff. Waverly being all... up in Bobo's face, basically, and talking about telling Wynonna that she can't wait for him to, or for her to shoot him in the face. Love when she gets herself going there. And having some fun, the 2 of them, with some of the scenes back at BBD, when they're listening in terms of what's going on. It's, kind of fun and interesting as the 2 of them do that. Also a fun scene at one point when Wynonna, spills the beans, if you will, or finally admits that she and Doc have had sex together, and Waverly making like no big deal. She already kind of had a feel for what's going on there. And then a little bit towards the end, as the whole thing's playing out with the commune and all, when Wynonna gets dumped back in town, and she has that list that Waverly's looking through, and they realize all the girls on there had disappeared or were found dead now. So some big stuff for this story. And then the very end. I mean, how can we not get emotional, especially going back now when... the faces that Mel does, realizing that Eve is actually Willa, and when she brings her back to the homestead, and that but it's a little scene in the sense it's not very long, but the very emotional one, when they're getting out of the car, and then Waverly's on the porch, and they're talking about, that Wynonna has brought her out there, they're going to have a guest, and then when Gus comes out and, drops the beer and recognizes her as Willa, woo, little chills. I mean, how big is that for the show and what's going to go forward? So some good stuff definitely here in these 3 eps, but not a ton. But again, those of us who are watching the show realize that we're building. This is very much a growing relationship in terms of how important it is on the show and how many scenes we're going to get. A lot more to come here as we get to the end of season 1. So some good stuff here. And can't wait to see what's coming, as we said, in the next few. Probably won't be covering as many eps per video. As you know, we're going to start to get a lot more scenes. But, we'll keep things cranking because I got to get one of these out about every few days if I'm going to make my goal of getting this done by, probably the end of May, I think, is my rough timeline. So, again, thank you, everyone, for the thoughts. Checking out the videos, leaving comments, spreading it around, keeping us talking about Wynonna Earp during the hiatus. You folks are all awesome. I really appreciate it. It's so much fun for me. So, I hope you all take care.
Hey guys, Kylie here. I just wanted to add a few notes to this conversation about 108, 109, and 110. I'll start with 108. So for me, 108, although they're not actual, a lot of scenes of the 2 sisters together in the episode, I do think that there is a huge undertone of Earper sisters with Waverly, and you're getting to see her dealing with Wynonna being gone and in danger, and that mystery around what's happening, and she's going to get a chance to shine, sort of show her helping, Dolls and Doc find her. So for me, I think there's still a big sisterly love sort of undertone to this episode. The final scene is one of my favorites, though, even though it's very quick. You get this moment of the 2 girls and the picture being burnt, and you get to see them sort of like, what now? Like, what, we set out for the school, and we completed it, and we now have to figure out what's next. And so I kind of like that sort of small, intimate moment that they have there around the burning picture. And Dom and Mel, as always, play it really, really well. So that's great. For 1010, again, this is, this episode really spoke about the Earp sisters' sort of dynamic with that opening scene of them bursting into Shorty's and, going gung-ho into Bobo and his operation there. And just, you get the sense of them working together, whether at first that they're actually planting the bug or not. But it's just this great moment of, badass, we're charging in, we're doing it. And I love that scene a lot. Also, at the end of the episode, where you sort of get that first dynamic of oh, Waverly bought somebody home. Oh, and then the reveal of obviously it's Willa, and it's that sort of oh shit, what now? Between these 2, is it going to change the dynamic between the family? And it's just such a great episode, sort of fueling the what next, as well as the same sort of thing that they had in 108 with the picture burning, what's next for these 2. And I love that about this episode. So anyways, looking forward to next week's.
Hello, Jill here, aka Natalie's office. I'm here to talk about 108, 109, and 110 because Kevin is mean and he's making us talk about 3 episodes at once. Just kidding. Kevin is awesome. So 108, Two-Face Jack. I think this, there weren't a lot of scenes with the sisters together, but I gotta believe, Waverly through this whole thing was like, good Lord, I just got Wynonna back, and now I'm about to lose her again. And that had to be really devastating to her. And obviously it was in the episode. And at the end, the final scene with them together, Waverly was kind of curling herself into Wynonna, resting her head on her shoulder, or putting her hand around her waist. It was, in my mind, it was more Waverly was taking comfort from Wynonna rather than giving her comfort, even though it was Wynonna who just went through this pretty traumatic event, because Waverly just, again, she had just gotten her sister back, and she had almost lost her again, and she just wanted to be close to Wynonna, and so it was a little painful, actually, when Wynonna walked away from her at the end of that final scene, but it showed certainly just, the love between these 2 sisters. So moving on to 109. So let me just first mention the slow dance, the slow motion dancing at the beginning of with Wynonna. Perhaps slightly inebriated, but damn, Scrofano, like, ooh, yeah, that was quite the scene. And I think I'm gonna spend just for 109. Again, they didn't have a lot of scenes together, but what was really cool about 109 was that their love life, at least, really went in parallel throughout the entire episode. It's like they were living kind of the same journey, but with very different results in some ways. For instance, when Waverly went to Nicole and tried to do her awkward, I get it, you're a lesbian, not a unicorn. She tried to confess her these feelings for Nicole and was unsuccessful. We cut right over to the homestead where Wynonna's actually trying to extract some form of pleasure from Doc. And golly, he's unsuccessful, or she's unsuccessful because the Constance kind of interrupts that. Then later we cut over to the bar and Gus is going, "Hey girl," to Waverly, "go after what you want and who you want." And then we cut back to the barn where Doc and Wynonna have Constance tied up, and basically Constance is telling Wynonna, "You don't want Doc. Doc's always second fiddle. Go after the guy you want, which is always the lawman," meaning Dolls. And then near the end, Waverly actually does what Gus suggests and goes after the girl, the person she wants. And you might go, well, at the end of this episode, Wynonna ended up, the last scene was with Dolls, when Dolls had brought her that revenant. So it was kind of, they weren't together, but their journeys really kind of paralleled each other in that, in this episode. And that was just more interesting than anything else, I think. So then we come to 110, and I need to say this first about 110, is that, is it so wrong that I really take a lot of enjoyment from the fact that Wynonna hit Willa upside the head with a bedpan? I don't think it's so wrong. There I am. I've just put it out there. But yeah, this episode, obviously 110, is, we enter the roller coaster ride. I think I mentioned earlier in a previous tweet, or a previous video rather, like 104 was when the roller coaster ride left the gatehouse. And now with the end of 110, we're at the top, and we're about to go screaming down that first hill. The sisters, their lives, even in 110, again, didn't intersect a lot, but it's clear that that they're there for each other. They, particularly when Doc was trying to leave, Waverly was like, "She needs you." Waverly knew Wynonna needed him, and that's what she was concerned about. And in some ways, the Wynonna's at this point needing perhaps Willa, which of course just leads into a fascinating next few episodes. So yeah, I don't know that I had a point for any of this, but there are my thoughts. All right, see you next time.
Hello again. All right, so in 108, this episode is always very difficult for me to watch, just with the cutting open of the body parts, and the violence against women, and, with Wynonna being so helpless for a good chunk of the episode. It's always been kind of a difficult episode for me to rewatch. But at least in terms of the Earp Sister Feels, We see that the first name that Wynonna calls out is Waverly. And then when we're first shown Waverly, we see that she wants to call in all the big guns to find her sister. So, they're both thinking about each other, and their safety is their primary concern. And then at the end of that episode, when Waverly asks Wynonna, so what now? When they're burning the picture of the seven, it's a little bit telling because, Wynonna doesn't answer her. She just kind of walks away. So it's kind of nice that they are having this moment where they're feeling together, but they're not really talking. So it's like they don't really have the words to express what they're feeling. Or at least Wynonna doesn't, or not with her sister yet. But in the next episode in 109, we see that Doc is the first person that we're shown, Wynonna actually talking about how she's feeling regarding killing the seven. It's this on again, off again lover who she's talking to, but not, there's this person who has honesty and trust issues, but it's not her sister that she's talking to. And she even tells Dolls, that she was alone and scared when she had the psych assessment with that agent. So we see Wynonna talking to Doc and talking to Dolls before we see her expressing any of these vulnerable emotions with Waverly. And, this is again showing how Wynonna feels like, her main job is to be her sister's keeper and to, be the rock, which means not letting Waverly see how much she's hurting. But this is really, it's just preventing them from getting closer and deepening their bond. Because without the ability to be vulnerable and open with her sister, there's just always going to be a wall in between them. Because they're not, allowing themselves to be their full, messy, raw, authentic selves with each other. And at this point, with Waverly, we see that Wynonna is okay with showing, the hard emotions, quote unquote. We see the anger and the righteous indignation, especially when we find out that Shorty's is getting sold and Wynonna's just not having any of it. But Wynonna is not really comfortable yet showing the softer emotions with her sister. The sadness, the grief, the insecurities. And it's interesting again to see this in the rewatches. It's in such contrast to later episodes where we see Wynonna being vulnerable with her sister and actually allowing herself to be comforted by Waverly and actively seeking out that comfort. So I can't wait to get to those episodes and, see that happening. And then lastly, in 110, we see Waverly telling Doc about Nicole before she tells Wynonna. But it is kind of cute to see Waverly being protective about Doc and Wynonna's relationship and wanting Doc and Wynonna to be honest about their feelings for each other. She's kind of getting to play the protective sister role here, and wanting Wynonna to have a responsible relationship. And even though there's a bit of judgment, in her notions of what makes a legit relationship and, what she thinks that Doc and Wynonna should and shouldn't be doing, which she does get called out on by both Doc and Wynonna. It's laying the groundwork for her to start seeing Wynonna as someone who, can make her own choices and make her own mistakes. And even though it may be different from what Waverly might have done, she can still just let her sister be messy and still love and support her anyway. And then finally, we're left with that cliffhanger at the end of the episode where, we get a new Earp sister in the mix. at the end of 110, and we just know it's going to shake up the dynamics between the OG Earp sisters, our core duo, Wynonna and Waverly. And, we get to see how this either stresses or strengthens the bond that they've been building together so far. So yeah, those are just some of my thoughts, and looking forward to hearing everyone else's. All right, bye.
All right, so episodes 109 or 108 to 110. I think the big important things in these 3 episodes, and specifically the last 2, like the huge things are the stability and trust that like the Earp sisters now have in the season. So we're kind of over like the expositional like getting used to each other thing, which was like really well played out. But now, since obviously at the end of 110 we are introduced to Willa, so everything prior to that is like wonderfully juxtaposed with like trust and understanding and all of that in Waverly and Wynonna's relationship, so that it can just all be torn apart at the end of the season, as is expected. So in 108, which is like the most terrifying episode of television in the world, I think that the important, like one of the, I guess, like only things of note that I have is that the first person that Wynonna asks for in like the fake hospital is for Waverly, which of course is always important. Like the first person you ask for after you've recovered from some trauma always is like pretty important to you. And then in 108 and 109 we do see Wynonna sort of like hitting her stride as like the oldest sibling. She's taking on like more traditional roles in that aspect, which again is like beautifully juxtaposed because then Willa comes about and now she's not the oldest sibling anymore. But in 108 and 109, we get Wynonna having little like tidbits of advice. After the 7 are done, she tells Waverly that, sometimes you have to let go. And then in 109, when they're overhearing Gus talking about selling shorties, they have the conversation, or Wynonna tells Waverly no one's gonna take anything from us ever again, and just sort of like little glimpses of her being the oldest sibling. And then for Waverly in 109 and 110, we see her understanding Wynonna and what she's going through a lot more than she has in any other episode. Because even in 108, when the 7 are done, she says they're gone just like that, which doesn't necessarily hit the right chord for Wynonna. But in the following episodes, she talks to Doc about Wynonna's feelings and, tells him that he should try and things like that. And just sort of like there are like big tones that she is trying to protect Wynonna's feelings because she does know her now, which is pretty important and critical in their relationship and is going to be utterly turned upside down in the following episodes because of Willa. So there's just all sorts of things in these 3 episodes that are just like, they have a stable relationship. And like the stability between the 2 of them is like hugely important because like obviously in 109 we have like Waverly and Nicole getting together, which is huge. And Waverly choosing not to tell Wynonna, and then we have, the sort of like unearthing of Wynonna and Doc, and Wynonna sort of having her hand forced and telling Waverly that that's been going on. So there's all sorts of instability in other relationships and like newness and like broken things, so that the relationship between Waverly and Wynonna is even more heightened. So then all of that like goodness and stability comes to just like an immediate shift at the end of 110 when Wynonna brings Willa back to the homestead. And like for the first time since like 105, we see Wynonna sort of snap at Waverly. So it's been 5 episodes of like their growing relationship. And then Waverly, who has been protecting Wynonna's emotions for like the last 2 episodes, is trying to come out and tell Wynonna that Doc is gone. And Wynonna says, "Not now, Waverly." And I think that is that moment is like the immediate shift to all of the crazy things that are happening in the following episodes. But I do think that, I think 108 maybe pairs with 107 a little bit better, but 109 and 110 are truly like stable Earp Sisters episodes. And they are just like set up as this really solid, really understanding relationship. They have like, a flow together when they're trying to figure out how to get to the woods and all of that stuff, and then for it to just come tumbling down at the end. So I think in the following episodes, we're going to be set up for some really cool stuff, and I look forward to it. Thank you as always, Kevin.